Hello, I'm Anni Davey. I've been telling Bible stories to children for many years, and I've got some lovely ones to tell you from the New Testament in this section here. If you want to know about the background, where I got some of the background detail from, you can look it up on the web on truthortradition.com or www.korky.info, where we've written a book called Jesus, Faith and Fact. So it's all in there somewhere, but there's some interesting things here which you may not know. You may think you do know the stories, but wait and see. So let's see what we've got. Hello. Have you ever been to a wedding? I've got my wedding hat here. It's rather gorgeous, isn't it? It's a winter wedding hat, really. Not very summery, but quite pretty. And this week I'm going to be taking an old lady a long way to a wedding, her granddaughter's wedding. We love weddings, don't we? We know what's going to happen. It's going to be the bride and groom all dressed up. Everybody gets in their smart clothes and puts nice things on, and perhaps we'll take a present. And then we'll go to a church or a registry office or somewhere really beautiful. And there'll be a service, and then photographs, and then a party afterwards, good things to eat. And then we'll wave them goodbye and they go off on their honeymoon, which we expect will be a nice holiday somewhere nice. And that's what we expect. If somebody gets a wedding invitation, they say, oh yes, we know what's going to happen. And they turn up on the day, and then they all go home afterwards, and it's been a nice day out. But in Jesus' time, it wasn't quite like that. In Jesus' day, the whole village would expect to take part. And it wasn't just a one-day event, it was several days. And you couldn't expect a young couple or their family to provide a party for several days for the whole village. So as with everything else in the Jewish time, well, still today, there were rules and laws about how it was to be done. So if you had an invitation to a wedding, you had to provide a wedding gift. We would anyway, wouldn't we? But this was a law, you must do so. So let's see what we've got here. We've got a steward of the wedding feast. Everybody provided something. Give him a hat, shall we? Now, he was a very important person because he was the one who decided what could be served and whether it was good enough to send out to the guests. So there you've got Jesus and his 12 disciples, his friends, and you've got all the villagers, and you've got perhaps some important people from the town, and everybody must provide a gift. Now, if they provided food and drink for the wedding, that was lovely, and everybody would enjoy it, and that would have been their gift. And it didn't impose a debt on the family. But a bit like in Macedonia and some places today, if you give somebody a present, it means that they feel that they have got to give you a present back. And in this society, if somebody gave me, say, £50 for my wedding, I could take perhaps £10 off to pay for their food and drink, but at the next wedding in their family, I would owe them £40. And that was a debt enforceable at law. They could take me to court to get that £40. So weddings were not quite as happy occasions sometimes as they are for us today, where there's just no debt imposed at all. And so here we've got some servants getting the food ready, and you've got the men would be reclining at the table in one room. There's Jesus, and here's the people getting the drinks ready. And in another room, maybe even in another house, there'd be the ladies dancing. They separated the ladies from the men. They still do that in some countries, don't they? We've got some dancing ladies here, shall we have? They're having a lovely time. Dancing round. Of course, there's no men there that can have their hair down. Have to imagine them all dancing round. And there's one other person there, Jesus' mum. Do you remember her name? Mary. Yes, of course you know. Well, Mary, the party was going really well, but then she noticed that the servants were getting a bit worried. So she said to them, what's the matter? And they said, well, it's awful. There isn't going to be enough wine. We've got these big jars. We've got some more. There isn't going to be enough to last the rest of the day, let alone another day. And if the party is a failure, if the wedding feast isn't any good, then the wedding won't work properly, the young couple will be in disgrace, the family will be ostracised, and we don't know what to do, because they couldn't just go down to the supermarket and get some more, could they? So Mary realised it was very serious, because technically the guests had provided for the food, and if the family hadn't bought enough food or wine, that was very, very bad. So she thought, there's only one person I know who could help with this. So she went to the room where the men were. It wasn't really the thing to do. And she said to Jesus, the wine is running out. And in the Bible it says something rather strange. It says, Madam, what to me and to you? That's the literal translation. But modern translators, people who know language, think that it actually means, don't worry, Mum, I know, leave it to me. So she came back in to where the servants were, and this is what she said. She said, should we read it together? Do what Jesus says. It's the only recorded talk that we have from Mary, apart from the song that she sang when she heard she was going to have baby Jesus. So for Mary to say that, do what Jesus says, was really important. Would Jesus ever tell us to do something that was wrong? No. He wouldn't ever tell us to steal or tell a lie or cheat or do anything like that, would he? Or be mean. He would only ever tell us something that was sensible to do. So the servants said, well, what does he say to do? And then they had a shock, because he told them to fill up the bath. Well, not quite. But there were 6 big stone jars, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they were set in the ground, so you couldn't see that bit there, that's under the ground. And it had pointed bottom to it so that they could scoop up the very last bit of water in it. And they were filled with water for hand washing, for cleaning things. Because every time they had a meal, they had to wash their hands. It's a proper thing to do, isn't it, even today? So he told them to fill up the water jars. They must have thought, look, we've got a crisis going on here. We don't actually need to fill the baths up at the moment. But if you do what Jesus says, something good is going to happen. So they must have done trips to the well with their buckets and come back, filled all the water jars. They filled up 135 litres each. That's a lot of water. And then Jesus said to them, right, take a cupful of that to the steward of the feast. What? You can imagine the fight that went on. You do it. No, you do it. No, you're the youngest. You do it. More than my job's worth. Give him a cup of it. Well, somebody took him a cup of water. And he sipped it and looked very puzzled. And they waited for him to explode with anger, think, who's giving me this? He took another sip. And a great big smile spread over his face. He said, this is the most amazing wine I have ever tasted. Where did it come from? Most people serve the best wine first, and then when everybody's had a bit too much, then they serve the rubbishy one. But this is fantastic. You've saved the best wine till last. It's amazing. Yes, serve it out. And Jesus said to them, don't tell anybody where it came from. Well, it was astonishing. So the party went on. Everybody had enough to eat and drink. And it was an absolute rip-roaring success. Now, when you do what Jesus says, let's see. Should we read it together? Amazing things happen. Amazing things happen. I've got a friend, and he was not a very good man. He was in prison for cheating people of some money, and he was very miserable. And somebody gave him a Bible, and he started reading it. And in it, it told him that he could turn away from his old life. And if he said sorry to God and really meant it, then God would give him a new life. So he said, right, I'll try it, I'll do it. And his whole life changed. And for the last 20, 30 years, he's been teaching people in another country about Jesus. And the whole society is changing for the better. They're learning to be kind to one another, about love and joy and peace and gentleness and self-control. And all because he decided to do what Jesus says. It's the most amazing thing. And Jesus said to them, don't tell anybody where it came from. Well, it was astonishing. So the party went on, everybody had enough to eat and drink, and it was an absolute rip-roaring success. Now, why did Jesus say to them, don't tell anybody where it came from? Well, if he'd announced that he was going to do a wonderful miracle or that God was going to change the water into wine, nobody would have thought about the young couple or the wedding at all. They would have all been looking at him. And he didn't want their wedding to be spoiled. He wanted to save them. Because if the wedding had been a disgrace, they could all have sued the young couple for damages. They might even have had to pay money by being sold into slavery till the next Jubilee. It was actually a disastrous situation which Jesus rescued them from. But the extraordinary thing is, and the most exciting, is that this is the first story that's told about the miracles that began to happen when Jesus started his work. And at the end of that little story about the wedding at Cana, it says, and so his disciples believed in him. Well, if you'd seen something like that happen, you would realise that only God could do something like that. But there was a law behind it too. It's in a book called Law in the New Testament by a man called J.D.M. Derrett. And it said that if a rabbi is invited to a wedding and he must provide a wedding gift, he's not allowed to use the money that Judas held in the common purse. That was for buying food and drink for the disciples, not for wedding presents. So if a rabbi is invited to a wedding, then his father must provide the gift on his behalf. Do you see? Who does the Bible say was Jesus' father? It was God. And that's why that next line at the end of that story says, and so his disciples believed in him. They realized that they weren't dealing with a special teacher or rabbi, though he was both of those things. They must be dealing with the Son of God, the Messiah, the one who'd been sent to save them, the one they'd been looking forward to for thousands of years. So it's a very, very special story. And not many people know about that law and why it was that that story was included as the first of the special things, the miracles that happened when Jesus started work. So I hope you find that as exciting as I do. I'll have another nice story for you soon. God bless you all. Bye-bye.